Okay, welcome to the Red to Black podcast with your hosts Warner and Mario. And today we have Daniel Riggs from the Special Warfare Center and School. And guys, we could really use your support in pushing out this channel. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And Daniel, please introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks again, guys, for having me on here. My name is Daniel Riggs. I'm currently the Exercise and Plans NCOIC, which is non-commissioned officer in charge at the 5th Battalion Psychological Operations Training Battalion at the Special Warfare Center and School at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is the only battalion that trains influence and inform efforts in all of DoD.
That's awesome. So just so Mario and I are in agreement with you, no psychological ops on Mario or myself today. Does that sound good, Mario?
I did read some. I read Chris Voss earlier, so I'm going to try to use those tactics. No, you guys are safe.
Okay. All right. So Mario, let's get this podcast going. How would you like to start it?
Yeah, I want to start talking with technology and how it'll influence the future battlefield. So specifically, the history of technology and some of the complex systems that DoD is working on, and DARPA. Daniel, if you could kind of lead us in that discussion, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for the listeners, I know that a lot of Red to Black focus is on finance. So I'll tell the listeners, I am coming from this from a decidedly military lens, but I'm going to try to provide insights to you all that I think that could be evergreen. So whatever endeavor you're going into, I'm hoping that these insights are valuable. So I think when we talk about technology in general and how like the military industrial complex, for lack of a better term, how that's going to influence the future battlefield, I know everyone wants to look forward, but I think we should also look backwards. What I mean by backwards is we need to look at the past. Why do we ultimately care? And this isn't to be pedantic, but I'll probably have a lot of seemingly pedantic answers on this. But why do we care about tech in general? Like, what does it give us? And it's always influenced the battlefield. So when people are like, well, how's tech going to influence the battlefield? It's like, well, it always has. I mean, the Romans, their great contribution to warfare was not the phalanx, it's roads. That is their absolute innovation, how they're better than everyone. All right. It's just like, it's analogous. And the reason I have that is because it's fresh in my mind from just reading Altered Carbon, is the ability, like they talk about it in that book, is their strength is not their military training, but the ability to simulcast, which is transporting their soldiers across the galaxy instantaneously. So we've always had technology. It's always been an important part of warfare. I mean, you can go back to Archimedes. I mean, at the siege of Syracuse, where the Romans are trying to take it, I mean, he has his giant crane where he's picking ships up and just dashing them on the rocks. And his giant magnifying glass is just zapping dudes like, a 6-year-old with a magnifying glass would do to bugs. Ballistas and all kinds of other instruments. And he frustrates the Romans tremendously. And there's a reason they want to take him alive. And a reason I'm pretty sure that whoever ends up killing him, which you are not supposed to do, they want to take Archimedes alive for good reason, because he totally messes up a bunch of legions in that battle. Is when you're talking about tech, we also have to think about the people behind it. So when we talk about tech, I don't want us to get too fixated on, what someone reads in Wired or rumors coming out of DARPA or anything. It's just as important to understand what drives innovation and looking to the past technological innovations and why they came about. Because oftentimes in history, we're just repeating these innovations. It's, well, what was the point of that? Well, maybe it was to shorten distance, or maybe it was to increase this cost asymmetrically to the opponent. So I think that's the important stuff of looking at technology. But if we want to look specifically, we can talk quantum. And I think maybe if you guys want to jump in, I feel like I've just been babbling on nonsensically, but, curious on your inputs on all that.
Yeah, I think what we saw in Wuhan, China in 2020, Warner and I were both in Hawaii at the time, that took our readiness, specifically in the Marine Corps. It really it put a hard stop on a lot of the initiatives we were doing training-wise. So although it maybe not it was intended to have that influence on militaries around the world, it pretty much put a halt on, aggressive training and posturing and pushing out and projecting forces. I mean, we were really focused on combating an invisible flu. So that's a technology. Although it's not traditionally used against militaries, creating strains of new viruses and then pushing them out on the globe. That had an incredible impact. So I think those are things that we're going to be fighting in the 21st century. Thoughts on that?
All right. Well, so I mentioned it earlier, but when you're looking at the whole quantum realm, which sounds really, really cool. The first time I had heard about quantum anything was when I read Michael Crichton's Timeline, where it was through quantum computing that they were able to travel in the past. I don't remember how they get from A to B, but that was essentially how it was. And with any of the quantum stuff, it's looking at dealing with complexity, and specifically complex adaptive systems. Now, whether you're ciphering and like going through all kinds of data, whether you're a stockbroker, real estate agent, whether you're a military person or an influence guy like myself, data is the name of the game. Now, the important thing is using these technologies and developing the human potential to actually deal with it. So I remember, in 2012, I think it was Nate Silver I forget his website, but he successfully predicted, I think, the majority of the House seats and Senate seats and all that. And he did it through, rigorous statistical work. And then 4 years later, he does not come up with it. He's way wrong. Just like most people were way wrong on Trump, way wrong on Brexit, way wrong on, what was going to actually happen. And these guys in this technology, we have to weigh it against humility as well. And how much are we developing ourselves? The lesson of Robert McNamara, I don't think, can be understated. Management science became essentially management religion. And you saw that coming into DOD and across USG that, we better be able to break it down in some kind of quantitative manner. And we don't care about anything of the military art. We don't care about your historical things about this. We're going to crunch these numbers, and that's going to determine how you're going to do things. And we saw how easily all of that got manipulated in Vietnam. And then we end up, unfortunately, sort of repeating this cycle in Iraq. So, if you're trying to increase your profits, if you're trying to increase your effectiveness on the battlefield, it's understanding not just what these new technologies are, but their limitations and where the human is going to actually have to come in there and do something with that data and do something with that technology. Unfortunately, it's at times with tech, one of my favorite writers talked about it, it just becomes this human golem, or just this imaginary amorphous beast where we give it all these supernatural powers. And we forget that AI or any of the quantum computing or any of that is still contingent on the human operator. And it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future. Yes, the Matrix can inform your imagination, and oftentimes science fiction is what informs our perspectives on things rather than science reality. But for a lot of it, we just need to take a chill pill and be cold and objective and see what these things actually are.
Yeah. So any insights you could provide us specifically with quantum computing and how that data could be used to make better decisions? So actually increasing decreasing the time, maybe that OODA loop cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, one of the big things I look at is the specific application of like quantum computing, for instance. It's, can help decrypt like encoded messages, even the quantum sensors and powering clocks. It's to get everything perfectly online. Mario, I'm not sure what your background in the Marines is, but I know that when I started in the infantry, coordinating for something as simple as, and I say simple, not easy, but something as simple as a platoon attack, where you're trying to get one group to flank, which is to go around and catch the enemy on one of their lateral sides while you're providing fire to keep them down. That is a very difficult thing to do. And unfortunately, with communication, you'd be surprised that the US Army does not have the best comms in the world. We might, but it just, for some reason, we're still using ASIP radios at times, and which is, the same ones they used in Vietnam for the listeners. And quantum computing or quantum any of those quantum communication may help to absolutely zeroize that time from transmission to actual effects. So at the tactical level, we may see that the quantum sensors for missile and aircraft tracking, the quantum ability for breaking down complex and unhumanly amounts of data into certain blocks that therefore, qualified professionals are going to have to interpret that. And that is a skill in itself. But, hopefully all the quantum stuff can help with the crypto analysis, cryptographic keys. It's basically a valuable means of knowing, if your technology has been intercepted, and you can examine it in that way. But it looks like it'll be step 2 of, any of the cool ciphering and codes of the future. There is some rumor, but I'm not sure if it's going to occur that, and I love blockchain, and been a fan of it for years, but recently actually purchasing it, that quantum computing will be able to, simultaneously do all of those equations, so it can break the code instantaneously. So that's one of the fears for blockchain, is the quantum computing going forward, which is something to keep in mind, though I don't know enough about that to speak positively on it. But there is the idea that quantum computing can threaten the blockchain. I think the past guest, and I think our mutual friend, Steve Englander, probably has some better insights and would probably maybe say that that's foolish. But it's a possible downside if you're a super technophile and if you're a blockchain enthusiast.
So 2 things before we go ahead that I heard in that to kind of parse out what you were saying. This whole idea where Mario and I pull our philosophy from, which is like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and then some of the older guys who taught Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. What was Warren Buffett's teacher? Do you remember? Benjamin Graham. That stuff is never going to change, because what you're talking about with quantum computing for our listeners is it's just going to be a faster way to analyze accounting. But accounting will always stay the same. So what you're really saying in all this is that the technologies will change, but don't fall in love with these technologies when you're investing in a business. Still apply the same fundamental analysis. The technologies will kind of ferret themselves out to see what's the one that's most efficient at creating a 30 to 40% operating margin business. And then those technologies like quantum computing will enable us to analyze a company much quicker. So instead of spending hours and hours, there's already sites. There's one site named Y Charts, which is about $300 a month. And you can go in and they'll analyze every company. Like Mario will spend hours doing it. Y Charts will do it for you in 10 minutes. Quantum computing will give you the analysis that you need like right now. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't go in and do your own analysis, because there's always faults in the system. But what I'm hearing is there's two things from this. Don't fall in love with the technology. Always trust the human and the ability to analyze underlying accounting. And then number 2, computing will change how information is shared. That's what I sort of heard in both those areas.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think you can gain as many insights from reading about the new tech. And if you go back and read the reasons accounting got started by those Italian city-states, I bet those guys and gals, probably most likely guys though, let's be honest, I bet them writing about why we are accounting and then showing why that was one of the most impressive economic feats. Like that was, you want to talk about like a Silicon Valley of its day. That was the hot technology, was accounting. And if you're looking at why they did it and what it's supposed to do, and you understand the telos of things, I think that informs you better. Like if you go into the gym and you're just like, well, I want an overhead squat because it's the cool thing. Well, why are you doing an overhead squat? Just like, why are you doing certain accounting practices? Like if you're trying to like get things balanced and have a good view of where all your dollars and cents is, how about you go to the basics and understand why those are basics and why those are principles? Likewise, if it's, exercise, go read Dan John about the squat. You don't need to watch a YouTube video about the guy who's showing you the latest and greatest overhead squat. Like the guy doing the overhead squat on the exercise ball, like that may be a great circus trick, but ultimately it's not going to yield you the kind of result you think it's going to, because it's merely a passing fad. And it's merely something for some charlatan to, remove you from your dollar.
All right, gentlemen, I think I'm going to push us to question number 2. Will AI drive information operations and kinetic engagements on the battlefield? So just kind of talking through the future of AI. We talked a little bit about blockchain, quantum computing. Warren and I recently have been doing some legal documents for a business we've started in Wyoming. And we would have paid thousands and thousands of dollars for an attorney to create these legal documents. I went to eForms, not endorsed, not sponsored by this, but we saved thousands and thousands of dollars to have wonderfully written documents put together by AI. So that's really multiple attorneys are out of work because of AI. So I think it's definitely going to change the administrative battlefield. But can you just talk, Daniel, a little bit about how you see AI driving information operations specifically, and then also kinetic engagements?
Absolutely. Well, I'm hoping that there's the view, and you just said it, where it's driving these lawyers out of business. We can also think of it in the most positive way, right? Which is now they are more free up to do more productive things and advance our society. Um, so when we're talking about AI, how is it going to help? Does it threaten the intelligence analyst? No, I don't think it's going to. I think it require, like, instead of just like, here's a way of collating all this stuff, it's, well, what is your analysis on this? What is the intelligence you're getting? So AI is going to be able to give us a ton of information. Ultimately, the intelligence, i.e., the thing that gives us the information that we make a decision upon, that's what it is for commanders. Intelligence is not manna from heaven. Intelligence is, the informed opinions of certain experts, that assist the commander in making a decision. That's all intelligence is. So, a lot of people want to get fanciful with it and be like, well, it's like upgraded knowledge, or it's upgraded information. Not really. I'm hoping that it makes information operations easier, and I hope that it keeps our American soldiers safer. I would be terrified that if it was likely used to hysterical effects, basically, like if commanders are just using it or bureaucrats are using it in a way to remove themselves from decisions or responsibility, being like, well, AI told me to do it. It's like the AI didn't tell you to do anything. The AI gave you the information and gave you a probability that said it was 75% likely going to work, and it's 25% not going to work. And it hit 25 and you're wrong. And you're still like C-3PO can give you the odds of not making it through through the asteroid field, but you're still going to have Han Solo that's going to make you look foolish. So for AI, even if we have like the coolest ones, even if we have a drone AI, it's still going to be dropping bombs that we press the button for. And you can't have that Marine PL in the movie Aliens, who's totally paralyzed by all his systems and all the AI and everything else he has. He's still Ripley literally has to shake him out of his thing because he's so wedded to technology. And when it hits the fan, he's just totally unaware of what he needs to do. So I will always fall back on it, and it's going to be a constant refrain in the interview, is I just think when it comes to this, like Julian Simon talked about, we just can't beat the ultimate resource, which is the human mind. But will AI ultimately drive info operations? I'm hope it will, because there's going to be enough written in places like Foreign Affairs and War on the Rocks and foreign policy where they're going to talk about, you need to get this technology. And it's going, and I can say that because I know is an information operation, which PSYOP is a subset of information operations. They're like, well, we need PSYOP and we need the information advantage. And no one's really asking what that is. They're like, we need to seize the narrative. Well, what's a narrative? There are these unanswered questions. So I don't think anyone's going to have these exhausting conversations, which they need to be, about how we will employ AI. How does it make your decision-making easier? Instead of, oh, this is going to be just like extra body armor in a sense.
So those are two really interesting points, Daniel, because it's like a double-edged sword from what I'm hearing. You have AI, like Mario was saying, it'll take care of all, let's say you're starting a business, the 50% of like the menial things you're normally going to do, right? Like starting a bit, AI will go, I'll knock those out for you in an hour, which would take me and Mario a month. Right. So it's like, wow, that's a huge, huge advantage, because that enables us to take our focus from like menial administrative tasks to more creative tasks, like you were talking about, Daniel. But now on the opposite side, because I'm an ex-pilot in the Marines, I learned how to fly on like old school gauges and the stuff called partial panel, when you lose your main gauges and you go to like a few gauges to tell whether you're upright, going straight, flying level. If you're using AI as a crutch, and then the system gives out, like your example, Daniel, then it's like, well, I didn't put in the foundational approach to analyzing a business or building a business. Like, oh man, where am I now? So those are going to be really interesting sort of dynamics to deal with, this double-edged sword do I forego all the basic building blocks that makes me great at building a business or investing in business, and I just take what AI gives me? Or do I start off and build those blocks out? And when I understand them a certain level, then I let AI take over for the rest of it. I think you start from the bottom, build it up, and then let AI jump in when you figure out how to do that. But most people aren't going to do that. They're lazy. They're just going to go, AI, tell me what to do. So that's the double-edged sword that you and Mario are kind of talking about. It's really fascinating. That's how to apply it, in my opinion, to business.
Yeah, and it's how well balanced you are, and I don't like it's very Taoist, I guess, in a sense, but like, can you balance your yin with your yang? Can you balance your tech with your own personal development? And I'm not saying, and that's an incredibly mundane and cliched thing to say, but yet to I read enough history about it where I'm seeing these guys who were true innovators. They were tremendously respectful of the past and saw where those influences came from, and yielded as much insight from that as they did being extremely kinesthetically or cognitively or whatever gifted. Is that they melded those and they balanced, and that was probably a tremendous amount of strain to do so. But I'm sure guys like you're talking about Warren Buffett and so forth. My guess is that there was an incredible insight into monetary policy and fiscal policy and stocks and everything else melded with what are the instincts that I need to like uh, very effectively, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically polish up.
Analyze.
Yeah. And it's
Analyze.
like, okay, how am I going to add to this thing?
Yeah, so the AI is never going to replace the creativity that we have in our brains and collectively the creativity we can have through teams. I see that AI could definitely project the future of logistics or where logistics demands are going to be the highest in the battlefield or in business. Warner and I are talking about a little business in Central Texas and how to run our own distributing throughout Texas. And I could see AI making better decisions or more informed decisions faster than Warner and I and a team of logistics, for better term, officers and NCOs in Texas, trying to run a little business in Central Texas and trying to figure out where we need everything to go tomorrow versus coming in and already having that day. And that frees us, like you said, Daniel, that frees us up to do more creative things or different things. We would have been spending that horsepower projecting logistics, and we're back on to focusing about operations or focusing in a more creative space where we definitely have the advantage. So I could
Absolutely. I mean, and if the listeners, you need an analogy, there was maybe it's an apocryphal story, but I'm still going to say it happened. Is Milton Friedman was in Egypt back in the day, and there's all these guys, digging a canal or whatever with shovels, and he's watching them dig shovels, and he sees a front loader like right next to them, and he talks to the supervisor of these guys. He's like, "Well, why aren't you using the front loader to just do this at you don't even need these guys. They can do other stuff." It's like, well, we need to keep these guys employed. He's like, well, why don't you just employ 200 people and give them all a bunch of spoons to do the same thing? We're scared of like losing something in the present where, we ought to be thinking towards the future. And I think that's a real thing for humans. And I think we're evolutionarily bound to avoid thinking that future wise and just thinking, that immediate gratification. So it's a hard impulse to overcome. But, when we talk about, another topic going, forward in here, we can talk about the marshmallow test and, can you pass the marshmallow test in some degree in your personal life and in your business life to actually achieve what you need to?
Oh, that's fascinating. So yeah, so what you're saying about Milton Friedman, just to clarify for the listeners, what he's talking about is really they're focusing on the present, but it's a deception. They're actually focusing on the past and bringing that past forward to the present. So that supervisor is like, well, I don't know how to operate that front loader, yet I know how to do the shovels and I'll get it done by the end of the day. Maybe I'll make a mistake in the front loader, not get it done, and my boss is pissed at me. So it's coming from the past that blocks you from going to the future. When you let go of that past, it'll always be there. But when you choose not to engage in it or listen to it, then you can create that future going forward. And you're right about most individuals. They're afraid of letting go of that past because the future is unknown, and creating that unknown there's a lot of fear associated with it. But once you do that, like Mario and I building a podcast, or you, Daniel, you transition out of the military, once you do that over and over and over again, you actually get addicted to it. You're like, nah, I don't want to hang in the past. I'm just going to throw myself into the future. So I think those are some excellent points. Mario, what are your thoughts?
Well, AI is going to radically change the future battle space of jobs, and it's going to free up time. We're going to have more time. We have more time than our ancestors did 200, 300 years ago. What are people going to do? That's still a question mark. What are people going to do with their time, and what is the most productive use of their time? I think it's creativity. I think that's where we're still going to have an advantage. I think podcasting, you're going to spend some time making content. You're going to consume content. You're going to make content, and then there's going to be businesses built around that to facilitate you being creative. Any thoughts on that, Daniel?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be this tension. I just finished a book on the CIA, and there was, from its inception, there has been, between directors, there's always been a drive for either gadgets or spies. So are you going to invest in Q, who arms bond, or are you going to create more bonds? And even with the Army right now, I've heard, I would have never thought a sergeant major would ever say this in the Army when I came in. One of my sergeant majors a few weeks ago was saying something effective, what does it hurt? Is it possible that we could maybe do a 4-day work week? We've found one of the decent silver linings in COVID is we're finding, especially with the military, boy, do they love their meetings. I can't really speak to the Marine Corps, but there's some units in the Army that
Marine Corps loves.
Oh, do they? Okay. Too. So like everyone becomes a slave of Outlook. Like, oh my God, what meeting do I have now? And I think we're realizing, like efficiency wise, do you need to stay to 1700 every day? Or is it possible that you could have everything done conceivably by 1600 on a Thursday and not have to nug it out till 2200 on a Friday and come in on the weekends? I mean, there may be other untold benefits for your soldiers that way. Happier soldiers that are soldiers and Marines and airmen and sailors that are coming back on Monday mornings refreshed, and they've engaged in something that they truly love and believe in, and it may end up actually increasing retention. I mean, these are untold benefits for that. And for anyone entrepreneurial or in the finance world, like you guys are, I mean, that free, like allowing AI to take up the low work enables you to think more critically about the world instead of focusing on, oh, well, I gotta, whatever Excel stuff you may be puzzled to get through, you can just have this program simply do it for you.
Yeah, there's an old guard in the military. I'll speak for the Marine Corps that is into using both your hands to do everything. You're constantly busy. If you're not looking anxious and irritated and constantly stressed, you're not working hard enough. And there's a new guard that's PTing 4 hours a day, and they look well rested, and they're using technology to. And I'll just use an example as a sight count. We used to physically count rifles and pistols and other assets, MVGs, and now you can simply walk around with a laser and shoot it on a barcode and knock out. You're not reading serial numbers. You can save. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of man hours went to literally reading off serial numbers in an armory. It's all done. It's all done with technology nowadays. It saves that time. You can be a more fit Marine. You can cycle. You can run. You can swim. You can be a stronger, fitter Marine if you're not sitting there reading. And there's no benefit. Although the sergeant major might like that you're busy for 4 hours reading numbers, the sight count's a sight count.
Exactly. And I think it's important to realize, and the military has always had that hard work ethic, but in the private sector, my dad, when he was working, he remembers the 80s, and everything was about the coming Japanese behemoth. And everyone wanted to be the Japanese. And because Silicon Valley informs so much about innovation, and because Silicon Valley is so well positioned to Japan, they're like, well, we should do what they imitated everything from Japan, and therefore America imitated everything in Silicon Valley. And you go there, and my dad would tell me about it. He's like, they were miserable people who were working 16 hours a day. You'd fly in, and they'd make you drink a bottle of whiskey with them every night, and it was just the worst. And what you often see with people doing this is they're stage acting for about a third of that work. They're just pretending to work. I know people in Silicon Valley where they say, it's unfortunately like the the story of Stalin, where the guy got shot who was the first one to stop clapping. And that's not a way to run any kind of efficiency. And people think that, are have trouble, I think, distinguishing between what a measure of performance and a measure of effectiveness is. Your measure of performance is how many hours you worked. Your measure of effectiveness is what you actually got. And that's what, like, the Austrian economists are so great when they very effectively, like, determine value and overturn the labor theory of value, is that ultimately what is value is subjective, and it's not determined by X amount of, widgets. It's not determined by X amount of hours. It's by what you're actually doing, what the end state.
Yeah, so that's a great point. And what it points to is two different things, which is when you're looking at a business is performance and did you hit the measurable results or not, the end state you're talking about, right? And where this kind of emotion and looking good comes in is when it's like, well, you're not working hard enough. And this happened to me in the military. I went to do a post in Kuwait where I was the aviation liaison officer, and I was responsible for sourcing all the air from Kuwait to Iraq. And I moved Muse and everyone. I had access to the I don't even know if I can say that name. I'll schedule that out. But I had access to a system in the Air Force that enabled me to move traffic from Kuwait to Iraq. And I showed up to that job. There was a major in my position. I was a first lieutenant. I was able to create 50% more time for myself because I was in charge of the position because of my efficiency. Now, that's the problem with the Marine Corps. It's like the guys that get promoted are the guys that look busy. But the guys like me and Mario who are like, hey, we could do this better and we have 50% more of our time, that's actually looked down upon. And that's sort of the challenge. That's why a lot of people go entrepreneurial, because they don't want to deal with this like administrative bureaucratic structure where it's like, well, I finished in 4 hours, you're finishing in 8 hours. But this guy is getting more kudos because he's looking the part. So I think that's what you're really talking about. It's like, and that's what AI will kind of enable, I think, corporations and businesses to do. It'll be like, hey, listen, this guy's more efficient than you. It'll tell you he's more efficient than you. You just look good all day. And it'll point it out. Yeah, go ahead, Mario.
I want to give a pro tip to my nephews listening. If you join the military, you join some corporation that is really, you can do your job at 50% of the time that you're physically in the office. Don't act busy. Don't pretend to be busy. Actually be busy. Run your side hustle while you're at work. Do all your work. Get all your work done. I've spent over a decade running a side hustle in the military. No one's ever had a problem with it. I do my work. I come in there. I do my 50% of the time I'm working in the military. The other 50% of my time that I'm actually physically in the office, you can ask Warner, I'm running my side hustle.
Yeah, I do. I think all of my mediocre writing that goes out to these publications at work. So, salute to the Army for that. But, I guess with that is, at least with mine, I can somewhat justify it and be like, well, I'm increasing whatever, with the this is what I can say. I can be like, well, it's increasing the reputation of psychological operations across the joint environment and contributing to the conversation. Ultimately, yeah. Part of it is like, I just want to read. I just want to write. Like it's a compulsion. So yeah, it just allows me to do that.
I'm still buying you guys JDAMs through my taxes. So I pay my taxes. I get you guys a couple JDAMs.
So to keep this train rolling, how bringing it back to business, what I'm hearing is that there's always going to be this kind of push and pull between looking good and performance in a business. And you can see it's not changing no matter what the technology does. There's always this two sides of the coin. A foundation of a great investor, and Mario talked about this a lot, there's two things. It's evaluation and patience. And then on the other side, there's euphoria and excitement. One requires a rational mindset, clear, focused, critical, concise. The other one requires like a very artistic, it's enjoyable. There's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of analyzing businesses and finding great businesses, you start with the analytical side and you find an underlying phenomenal operating margin business. And then you branch out and go, hey, do they have this artistic, exciting brand? And you can actually find great businesses by looking at great brands and then diving in the other way. But your core analysis is that accounting, cash flow, and then driving deeper to make sure that it's all in integrity. And then developing a price at which you pay for that business, a strike price, and then you just wait. That's what people don't get. Mario taught me this. You just wait and you wait and you wait, because the returns you make by waiting will far outweigh the returns you're eking out by trying to deploy your money at all stages of the cycle. And I think, so to round it back to this podcast, what we're pointing to is that even though AI and tech and everything gets super, super good, we're still dealing with the same type of data. The data will never change. A business is a business. AI, just like one guy said this the other day in a podcast, he said, listen, technology doesn't change who we are. It just changes how we gather and collate information. We're still doing the same thing we did thousands of years ago. It's just tech is making it easier. So that's exactly.
It's faster. It's speeding it up. This conversation 1,000 years ago would have been in pen and paper between three fellow service members, and would have taken months. But we could have knocked out this conversation, and now we can jump on. I mean, we're all over America right now. We're jumping on this digital platform and having a fabulous conversation. So technology speeds up what we've always done, and we're going to be creators. We're going to continue to create and innovate and think. And Warner and I dream about running a business together is being able all day long to think and create, spend entire day thinking through problems, thinking about solutions, tactics, and creating and innovating. That's all we want to do. So AI, embrace, Warner gave me a good tip, go as far down the road with technology until they want to enter your body. Then you probably want to reject it. Don't merge your body or your brain with AI. But
Yeah, don't merge. That's our goal, man. Our goal is to build this thing up so we can bring on guys like you. We're in the discovery phase right now, so in terms of measurable results, it's not workable for us to give you a measurable result by when we could bring other individuals on, because we're in the discovery phase, as I said.
Well, if you guys are successful and you need a janitor, let me know.
So Mario, go ahead. What are we covering next?
Yeah, I think our last topic we want to kind of hammer on is how do you position yourself for more personal freedom in an increasingly unfree world. So technology, video cameras, we're constantly bombarded with data that's being collected on us, and you're losing some personal freedoms. We talked to Steve about this, and he's down in Costa Rica, and he's got 4 chickens, and he's got some personal freedoms. So Daniel, how do you position yourself for more personal freedom in an increasingly unfree world?
Okay, now when I have this question, this is going to irritate you guys, and hopefully it won't irritate the listeners too much, but let's talk about this, right? So what kind of freedom are we discussing? Is this kind of like the freedom of the wild ass that Hobbes talks about? Or is this like the freedom of responsibility and struggle, that freedom to create? So for me, at least, I think that the freedom that we're all discussing is like, how can we be free to determine our lives, not to necessarily ingest as many drugs and have as much sex as we want, but the ability to say, I am going to determine what happens from daybreak until I put my head down on my pillow. And when we're looking at personal freedom, is the world becoming more unfree? And we can say, like, according to the news, we would say, yes, it is. If you're like a Fox News viewer, yeah. But what kind of repression is it? I would argue and say it's probably not like the Stalin level. If we want to be very negative, let's say it's maybe close to like Czechoslovakia in the 80s or something like that, where it's, maybe half or kind of a soft totalitarianism or authoritarianism, but that's ultimately a very weak system. And Havel writes about that in Power of the Powerless. I mean, but it's still terrifying that payment processors, can cancel people. I think the ADL and SPLC are teaming up with PayPal to, ensure that certain people aren't able to get payments. And that's a terrifying thing. But I think that the world is becoming more free. Mario, you talked about technology. Let's say like this hypothetical, and this shows us how the world is becoming better. And this is an example from Michael Malice that I really love. Let's say it's the 1970s and you two are having a debate over censorship. And Warner, you're saying that nothing should be censored. And Mario's like, well, what about child porn or Mein Kampf? And, that becomes the tension struggle. It's like, where do you come in? And then let's say I come in from a time machine from today and I said, listen, you guys, this is a pointless debate because we have the internet and I can just send as many copies of this child porn book or Mein Kampf across the world with a passcode key that I control and no one else can get to. So that point is moot. Like, and that's an incredible, not, obviously not transmission of those things, but the point being is that we are at a stage now where there is a free access of information to everyone. It's incredible the stuff that you can get. And I think for becoming more free, and if we want to call it an increasingly unfree world, open your eyes to what opportunities are there, because there are a ton of them. People are dying to give you decent content out there. And there's other people that are charging you a minuscule amount, like sometimes $5 a month. And some of these newsletters from really important guys that are far beyond what you would have gotten in Business Weekly 20 years ago are giving you insights unheard of today.
Yeah, so those are amazing points. One thing I want to add, one caveat, is this digital currency. Because if you can control, these guys know this, if you can control that currency, what they've done is they've created this system. I agree with you in terms of information, what the internet provides, if we still control it. But where I think there's a crutch is this digital currency where they can now control your ability to survive. Because most people don't know how to raise chickens. Most people don't know how to do a garden. Most people don't know how to build a house. Most people, it's hard. I mean, if you look at like where our whole society started, which is bartering on a farm, and then it transitioned to storing my gold in a bank, and they gave me a note. Then the Fed came in and said, well, I'll give the banks, we're all going to go on the same system. I'm going to give you a note, each and every bank, and we'll all be on the same note. And then fractional reserve lending off the gold, it went up, 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 right? We've gone away on all those different stages from our ability to be independent in a manner of survivability, not of creating content or being creative. So where do you see that in terms of this digital dollar, where they literally, with one flip of a switch, if they get us on it, they can control our ability to survive, since most people don't know how to survive?
Well, I don't think blockchain is going away anytime soon, or Doge or Ethereum or anything like that. There's clearly alternatives that are out there that people are seeing, alternatives to fiat. Even if it does go digital, I still challenge it. So if the Federal Reserve is making a currency, I would ask you, do you think who makes a better vehicle, Lamborghini or the Department of Transportation?
The answer to that one.
If you were betting against those two, who do you think is going to come up with something better? So you still, like, even like if we go back to the AI conversation, people are terrified. They're like, well, you see this fear mongering, like, well, China and Russia are ahead. I'm like, Russia's negative birth rate. Why are we like? Let's not worry about Russia so much, people. The innovation is still going to come from the private sector. Google and other people are far ahead on AI or quantum computing than the U.S. government, the Communist Party of China, or Russia. So there's, is the possibility of the state or, maybe other nefarious actors with the ability to control that. But I still think the backing that blockchain has, the brilliance of it, and other ones. And the good news is there's tons of these cryptocurrencies coming online every day, and there's plenty of bad ones, but luckily in a market system, which that is right now a pure market system, plenty of them go to the wayside, and the good ones are going to be the ones that stick around. So, should you be fearful? A little bit, but being in the government, I'm curious and a little skeptical about the effort of someone to, match what the blockchain founder's name, Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah,
Is anyone really gonna? Is anyone at the Federal Reserve or Department of Commerce going to even come close to that, or the Treasury? I would bet highly against them. Hedge way against them.
So what this points to for all our podcast listeners is what Mara and I are really focused on. If you drill down to the root of it, is your freedom to be creative with your pursuits in business. And the measure of that is how efficient you are at making cash and retaining that cash, which just shows up in the operating margin down to the cash flow margin. That's why we're sort of attracted to all guys, like not like attracted in a sexual sense, but it's like we attract each other because we're into this idea about being free to create. And the measurable result, as I said, is in a business is a better operating margin business, like an Oracle, or what are some other businesses, Mario?
I'm comfortable with talking about Oracle.
Okay, so we're gonna keep it at Oracle because Mario doesn't want to give away all our trade secrets. So we're gonna give you a few, and as Mario always says, go out and do your own research. We'll give you the fundamentals, and now you go out and find the businesses that match these fundamentals, which is a great way to learn. We don't want to give you everything. We want you to discover it. So for our listeners, it's this ability to maintain this freedom to be creative, and then that shows out in this operating margin business. What are your thoughts on that, Daniel?
So with that, I was just thinking about like what make those, successful traits, and even your concept. It goes back to the Bible, crazily enough. Like, how do you teach a man to fish, right? You don't fish for him. Again, just like at the beginning of the episode, I talked about, you go back to the past to find your lessons for the future, and you have the new tech that helps amplify that. I think it's important it's important for anyone to struggle. I think that's a very important thing, whether it's intellectually. Usually we just assign like, we see our sport athletes and like, well, they did this training and they're puking their guts out and they're struggling, and they went through that crucible and they came out the other side. Well, you're going to have to go through an intellectual crucible. And on a previous interview today, I talked about, they're like, well, what was your greatest achievement? And it wasn't like the winning of anything. It was starting writing. It was getting off my butt and committing myself to sitting in this library for an hour a day before I went home and just scribbling on paper and being terrible at it, and editing over and over and over again, and realizing that this article that was going to take 10 minutes to read was going to take 20 hours of my time, or 30, or something beyond those lines. So I think there's a certain persistence you have, whatever field you're in, to realize it's, for a while there, and eventually you'll hit that point where it won't be, but it's going to be an asymmetric relationship where, the amount of work you're doing is going to produce not an inefficient or unsubstantial amount of payoff, but it's not going to be the same to what you put in. But you do that because you love it. And even like with podcasts, the guys who started, one of my favorite podcasts, I think they had 20 people that were initially listening. And the key to
that's right around where we are.
Yeah, it's exactly. And that's the beauty of this, though, is you look back on these moments, and this is like, we gutted it out, and it's going to take maybe hundreds of episodes. So what? Like, again, we get back to, can you pass the marshmallow test? Do you have, what's your time preference?
What is the marshmallow test? We don't even know what it is yet.
You guys don't know the marshmallow test?
No, we have no idea. Okay. Mario, do you know what it is?
I was just playing. I was going to be the silent guy, gray man.
No. I call myself out and other people out.
Okay, it's a psychological test that they had for kids where they'd put these marshmallows or other treats on the table, and the kids that were, you could say, you can eat this one marshmallow now, or in 20 minutes, I'll give you two. And the idea being, and they found that later in life, the kids who waited and had the two were far more successful. And you look back to orientation of time for people. Like, there's a reason that monarchies were very successful for a while. And it's their time preference was such that they didn't invest their resources in things to get an immediate gratification, which is unfortunately one of the downsides of democracy, is that it's all about immediate gratification. And I think that's a part of, unfortunately, some of the negative aspects of our society, is we encourage this sort of low time preference, marshmallow, like eat the marshmallow as soon as you can, instead of, conserving your resources. I hear this all the time from investors where they say, some people I don't know why, they just think that people holding on to their money, it's like Scrooge McDuck. So basically their economics is from DuckTales, unfortunately, and not reading like Mises or Friedman or anyone else. And the perception is like, you're saving these things because you're holding it up from other people. It's like, no, I'm holding on to these reserves because I'm going to use it to invest in something worthwhile. And I think that that's how one ought to be. It's like, I'm, even in a workout, I'm not going to destroy myself on my warm-up row, because I know that the workout today is going to be focusing on back squats and bench press, and that's what the energy ought to be conserved for. The point of the row is to warm up my body. The warm up is not the workout. Like spending immediately is not going to get you rich. That's going to make you poor.
Yeah, what you're pointing to is performance. If everyone looked at their life in terms of performance, what's the final goal? Like do a certain amount of bench press at a certain weight, whether it's, your typical 10 reps, 3 sets, or you're going real heavy, right? And guys, there's different guys, one MMA conditioning guy, Joel Jamieson, you heard of that guy? He talks about how to condition properly and how a lot of these big buff dudes, they're real big and strong, but those aren't going to be the best guys conditioned for a fight. Because if you've ever been in a ring with someone, I used to do Muay Thai. I'm not scared of the 180, 200-pound guy. Yeah, he'll hit hard. I'm scared of the 160-pound guy that moves really fast and he'll throw a kick at your head in a second when you drop your hand, which happened to me. So the reason I say that is if you look at everything from terms of performance, what are you out to do? You have to be a fighter. Are you out to be a fitness body pro? Are you out to create money in business? And what we've set people up to do is say, hey, there's these really successful people. Mario and I get caught in it because we're on social media every day and we're like, oh, why are we not there? But we forget what you're saying, Daniel, which is, hey, put in the foundational approach that creates the performance that stacks on top of each other, that creates more performance, more foundational approach. And then after 10, 20 years, you've gotten to this point and everyone's like, well, how the hell did you get there? That must have been easy. It's like, no, it wasn't easy. You didn't see us back when we were at 15 subscribers going, there's 300 million people in this country. We only have 15, subscribing. What's going on? So those are great points, Daniel. Mario, do you have any thoughts?
I think you want to set your life up where things become addictive and then you're going to do them tomorrow. So if you're burning yourself out or you're doing things that are miserable, there's suffering is good, but do it in a way where you want to come back to the gym. So just on the physical fitness aspect, if you're doing so many pull-ups that you can't do pull-ups for a week, it's far better to do 8 really good pull-ups and get addicted to it and want to do another 8 tomorrow and another 8 the next day and the following day, another 8, and then add the 9th pull-up. And do it while it's easy enough where you can continue to do them.
Yeah, I was just saying I should have prefaced the thing about struggle earlier. Is that as Michel de Montaigne said, everything in moderation, including moderation. But don't the point of having the struggle is for that end state, for that telos. And when I'm looking at successful people, their telos is really strong. That objective, why they're doing the thing, is really strong. They understand why they're doing it. And, when it's on like social media, like I would say, one of the first things is get off social media as much as you can, or use it for a very expressed, purpose. Stop being ideological. That's just going to get you nowhere. Unless you want to be like some, CNN or Fox News or MSNBC contributor where you're just up there either as a wrestling heel or as a wrestling babyface. But use those things to your advantage, but don't get caught in that wrestling mindset of being there, because it's not going to do anything for you entrepreneurial. It's not going to do anything for you in your life in general. It's just going to leave you feeling so empty.
Yeah, the trap is if you're using social media or any type of platform for external validation, it's a trap. You're being trapped. You're being suckered into trying to get validation from other people versus using it as a platform to express your creativity or express your ideas, or to push out your content or your creativity. That's the way to do it. Is if you're in the gym for external validation, you're a slave. You're a slave to trying to get attention. And that's what you see. You can see that in social media. It's a trap for people that are validating themselves through attention. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for your mind. It's not healthy for your business. It's not healthy for your family. Any thoughts on that, Warner?
Oh, so going back to bring this back to what we're talking about in terms of operating in this unfree world, and there's different ways of defining it. What we're really talking about is what we're really pointing at. We got a little bit off the topic, but we really didn't, because what we're really pointing at, the way to be free in an unfree world, is just no matter what happens, express your creativity. Don't allow the noise. Don't allow social media. Don't go for looking good. Figure out what you love. There's a difference between what you like to do and love to do. For example, for me, I thought I really loved cooking. I tried to start a business around it. Mario knows about that. I thought it was performance. And I found out what I really loved was finance. That's what I spent all my time doing. I'm like, oh, I'm running this cooking site, but I'm spending all my time looking at finance videos. I'm spending 100 hours talking to Mario. And so it's really finding out what you love to do. I know that sounds cliche, but when you love to do it, you have to think about if you're going to build anything or put effort into it, it's going to take thousands and thousands of steps. So that love is like your battery. It's like your generating mechanism of power. If you're kind of, I'm sort of into it, it's not gonna go anywhere. And this applies to investing. If you have to make 1,000, 2,000 steps, not including maybe just 20 steps to buy 20 good companies along your career, but I'm talking about all the analyzing and evaluating. Oh, my son's back. But anyway, so
yeah, Daniel, why don't you close us out? Any other thoughts you want to express in this podcast before we sign off?
Yeah, I want to say that, like, we talk. I was like, okay, don't be on social media, but if you're going to use it effectively, I think that I'm learning how to, and I've done that by, contacting Steve, a guy in Costa Rica, who really liked this article I wrote on blockchain in January, and we've maintained this kind of relationship. And he recommended me to you guys to be on your podcast. I'm sure you're going to hate him for that because we just babbled nonsense, for an hour. But I also think that you can be tremendously hopeful for the future. There's a million examples of things that are going well. And I think for us to be successful, and I wrote down some traits. I'm like, what do I think is going to be successful to be free in a seemingly unfree world? And, be a salesman. Can you be entrepreneurial? Like, are you intellectually curious? Like, if government disappeared, do you have some kind of skills, right? Like, can you think design wise? Like, i.e., can you think holistically, not just through a narrow straw? And build networks. Like, can you build networks? I'm hoping that, talking to you guys, that, you'll support my work. And I, definitely, I'm subscribed to your guys' channel and, like it on LinkedIn and, try to comment when I can. But, going forward in the future, we all need to be out there. And that doesn't mean you're some shill for something, but frankly, if I'm at a point in my life where I'm on if we were all on a podcast together and we're shilling for like bluechew.com or something like that, that's probably a good sign for us.
Yeah, those are phenomenal points. I've done a lot of design training. It's really about everything you're pointing to is whatever you're creatively inclined to do, go after that. That's how you create freedom. And don't be fearful of it. Don't work on looking good. Don't do it for someone else. Just figure out what you're about and how that applies to investing in business, because it's all about resources. Is what we teach on this podcast is how do you find these high operating margin businesses? How do you invest in them? How do you buy them? How do you build them yourself? That all requires everything you're talking about: salesmanship, design, and the ability just to step out and network with people. Because everyone says, oh, I built this on my own. Well, did you use this software? Did you talk to this person? Did you use a cell phone? Did you eat that food that a farmer created? You never built anything on your own. It's always through the help of other people. So thank you, Daniel, for taking your time and efforts to share this with us. We'll definitely have you back on because there's about 100 different roads, Mario, and I could probably go down with you. You mentioned 20 or 30 different authors. So we're really looking forward to having you in the future, and thank you for your time. Any final thoughts, Mario?
Thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great meeting you guys both. And, I hope this is received positively by the audience.
Oh, it will be. It will be. Thank you so much, Daniel. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We invite you to get to know us by clicking on our LinkedIn profiles in the description of this video. Please subscribe, hit the bell notification for future updates, and share this content with your networks. Thank you for your valuable time and insights. We greatly appreciate it.